JWT token. How does actually JWT token works? We will first understand that, and then we will go to ASP.NET Core and see what are the efforts which are required for JWT token to work. So JWT, JSON Web Token, the name actually comes as JSON Web Token for the reason that it is made up of JSON objects coming together. So it ensures the trust and security in your application. JWT allows claims data. What does that claims data contain? It contains most of the time information about the user. It can also contains information about the domain, basically some header information we can say in general. And all this information has to be sent from client to server in a secured manner. So actually JWT, JSON Web Token, is a JSON object and defined in some RFC specification, is a way to represent a set of information between two parties. Now most important thing is it is made up of three things. It is composed of header, payload and signature. So three things come together for JWT. Your header is going to contain generally the algorithm which is going to be used for encoding and the type of token it is referred as JWT. Most of the time this is fixed. Then we are going to have something called as payload. Now payload is all that data which we want to send along with the request. It can be issuer, expiration date, company name, any kind of key value pair can be there in addition to some basic key value pairs. Like issuer, expiry date are these are few basic ones. On top of it, many more can be submitted. And finally, we have got the signature, which is made up of this and this in encoded form. So overall, your signature would look like this. Imagine if this is the header and this is the payload. Remember, this and this both are in base 64 encoded values. Originally, they are JSON objects. Treat JSON object as string and do a base 64 encoding. So you are going to get this, you are going to get this, and then with the combination of first two and overall encryption using HMACHA 256, which is based on some encryption algorithm, we are going to get this. So this whole thing is going to be submitted to server. So we have to frame this on the server, give it to the client, or we have to frame this on the client, give it to the server. But basically it is for establishing a trust between the two. So most of the time what happens is server is going to generate the token based on the information provided by the client, and that token is then given to the client. Client in turn will return back that token to the server, and server knows that yes, it is the same token which it has given to the client, and then it will process it further. So we'll discuss a little more about the processing, but first, how do we actually generate JWT token in case we are doing it manually? So as I told you, first part is going to comprise of header, which is a JSON object. You are supposed to provide the key value pair, and most of the time in JWT token, the header is fixed. We don't change that. It declares the encoded object is a JSON Web Token, and it is signed using HMAC SHA 256 algorithm. Basically, remember, these algorithms are one-way hashing algorithm. That means using these algorithms, we can only do encoding. We cannot ever get back the original value. Decoding is not possible. So we are going to, basically the information in the header is saying that this particular content is going to be encoded with so and so algorithm. Once this is base 64 encoded, we have the first part of JWT token. This whole thing has to be encoded with base 64. Same thing with payload, and payload is supposed to comprise of your key value pair, which we generally refer it as claims. Now in JWT, a claim can be defined as a statement about an entity. Most of the time that entity is a user, as well as the additional metadata about the token itself. You are going to contain some token, so metadata about the token, like expiry time about the token. I would want to keep that also in the claims data. The claim contains information we want to transmit, and that the server can use it to potentially handle authentication. There are multiple claims we can provide. Now these are standard claims, but that does not mean all this must be part of the request. They may be there, they may not be there. It's not mandatory to provide all of them. And this is how we frame the claims. Again, a JSON object with key value pairs. And once we have the JSON object with key value pairs like this, we again encode it using base 64 and we get the second part, that is the payload. The third part is going to be base 64 encoded of the header, base 64 encoded of the payload, separated by dot. And then we do encoding of the overall data along with one secret key. This is the key actually. This key I am not going to give to the client because this is your encryption key. So what I'll tell you, hello guys, please give me your header, please give me your payload. I am going to combine that and construct my data in base 64, and using my secret, which will be with me alone, I am going to encrypt it, and that encrypted value I am going to do a base 64 encoding and give it to you as JWT token. Basically, not only this, in combination of the header, payload and the three things again. The whole string I am going to frame and give it to you as JWT token. So next time what will you do? You will give me the encoded value. You will give me back my JWT token along with subsequent request, telling me that it's the you who has actually got the token from me. Once you give me the token with this secret, I'm going to redo the whole stuff and compare the value which I got and the value which you have, are they same or not. And only if they are same, I will treat the token as valid and let the request to process. If not, I'll reject with an exception. I repeat, this is the whole life cycle. So user is going to sign in. Now how will the user sign in? Obviously, most of the time it is going to be user ID and password. Alternatively, we have seen that we can use Google sign in, Facebook sign in, and so on. So there are different authentication servers, basically your authentication providers, to whom you are going to submit the request to sign in. Now what this authentication server are going to do? They will verify your credentials, and in turn, based on this formula, they are going to create a token and return to the client. So client now, for the credentials submitted, has that token. Now what are we going to do? This user is now going to submit a request along with the JWT token. Suppose we are doing a HTTP request. In HTTP request, we are going to use that JWT token in an authorization header, in your request header actually. And along with the request, when the token comes into the server, it is now going to verify is that token valid or not. And only if the token is valid, it will process the original request in the original API call which is there in the request and return the result. If not, an error is going to be reported to the client. So this is how basically the whole workflow is. Now coming to ASP.NET Core. The beautiful thing is ASP.NET Core, it is a very straightforward way of implementing JWT token because you have got a ready-made package for it. There is a middleware which is existing, and that middleware is responsible for validating the JWT token. Basically, it helps us in generating and validating. So what we'll have to do for this? First, we'll have to add a authentication service provider. And here we are saying JWT default.authentication scheme. Basically bearer token. The value of this is bearer. So we are saying that what we are expecting from the client is any kind of standard bearer token. So JWT token is supposed to be included in the request as a bearer token and submitted to the server. So that is the default authentication mechanism used. So any request which has JWT token, we are saying is a authenticated request. Any request which does not have JWT token, we are treating that as unauthorized request. And this is all for configuring JWT token. So when the JWT token is generated, it requires HTTPS metadata. That means the request should come in HTTPS format or it should not. Should the token be saved or not? Now, what are the very important thing? Validation factors for JWT token. So JWT token is going to be validated by a middleware. Now, what all things are required for validating? Signing key should be there in the request. Issuer signing key. Basically, some key has to be generated. That secret I told you, that we will have to specify to the middleware, so that the middleware is also going to use this key for authentication. Valid issuer. Along with the request, we have to now include some issuer, and basically we'll have to provide to the middleware a list of issuers. I'm going to show you with proper example, but I'm going to give a list of issuers, and only those who are issuing a token in that list, they are going to allow if this is true. If this is false, we are ignoring the issuer. Remember, issuer is going to be one of the payload. This is issuer. Toptal.com, here is the issuer. So that should be there in the list of issuers. Like that, valid audience is again a value which we get from the client. Audience, here AUD is supposed to be there. So issuer token, audience token, whatever client is submitting, these are supposed to be in the valid list. Then only the token is going to be treated as valid. That means we are not only validating with key, but we are also putting some kind of restriction on the issuer and the audience if we want to. It's optional actually. We can ignore the issuer and audience, but we can make it as mandatory. This issuer, this audience alone can be treated as valid JWT token. Otherwise, a token from somebody else, even with a valid key, is going to be invalid. So, yeah, how to achieve all this? Now, for this, what I have done is built a complete example. I'll just explain you this example, and it's pretty simple and straightforward. It's a web API project, a normal web API project. That's why actually this was supposed to be taken ideally after we complete web API topic. But ignoring web API for now, how is the infrastructure provided? Let's understand that. First, in startup.cs, you have the basic code. So in configure service, we are configuring the services, authentication service. We are saying it is bearer token which is supposed to be used for authentication and challenge operations. And we have got JWT bearer configuration data, all the configuration which I explained to you just before this. Just now I explained to you from the handout. The same thing is here. These two things are exactly as it is in the handout. Nothing is special here. But where are we getting this key from? This is the important thing. Where is the key coming from? Now in app settings of my project, which is a secured file, I have kept the key already. So app settings has a secret which we are loading here. App settings section dot get, and from get, from the app settings secret. And obviously app settings is some class which has secret. You know this, how the configuration file should be read when we have a file, when we have a class. So from the class, the settings is loaded, we get the key, the same key is used. Very important, this key is very, you're not supposed to leak this key to others. This is supposed to be a secured key. And it has some minimum length, I think 64 bytes should be the minimum length if I'm not wrong. So just take care of that part. Then this is one initial configuration finish. Now we need something to generate a token. So how do we generate a token? We want user to be authenticated. So here I have written iUser service, which has a method called as Authenticate, which is getting username and password and returning user object. Important thing is the user object has all this data. So I have put user ID, the role of the user, the first name, last name, username, password, token. Token is the most important thing. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to implement this method, and in this method I'm going to validate this username and password against my database, and if the username and password is found to be valid, I'm going to create a user object, populate all the data into it including the role and the token, and return the same. Client is now supposed to do caching of this user object, and that he is supposed to use it in subsequent request whenever it might be using Ajax, it might be using Angular, it might be using jQuery. It is up to you how you save the user object and use it for subsequent call. So there is one more method added here for demo purpose, get all. So two methods I'm implementing in user service, and this is not linked to any database. For demo purpose, it is only a list of users static objects, but this list can be replaced with a database table. Instead of getting data from the user list here, we can get it from a database table as well. So let's say we have ID 1, 2, 3, first name, username, all very similar. So here intentionally for first user I have given role as admin, and the other two users I have given the role as user. But that also you can get from database. And for verification, mind you, you can use ASP.NET Identity. Absolutely no problem. You can use sign in manager and verify if the username and password is valid or not using the ASP.NET Identity framework. So now, yes, we are getting app settings. Why do we need app settings? We are injecting app settings through iOptions into the constructor of this service, and I am going to inject this service into maybe our controller. I'm going to inject this service into the controller, and that is the reason this particular service for this particular interface has been registered as a scoped object. Services.scoped iUser service. So wherever I'm going to have iUser service as parameter in the constructor, I'm going to get the instance of user service. So this part is clear. The constructor is clear. Now the main method authenticate. Single or default we are trying to get, and if we get the object, we are going to proceed further. If we don't get the object, return null. User object is null, and null is returned to the client. But otherwise we have to use this JWT token handler. JWT token handler is a ready-made class which is available in .NET, and important thing is this is a built-in package in your ASP.NET Core packages. The ASP.NET Core meta package contains this as built-in. You may not even add a reference to some additional packages. So authenticate, we get JWT security token handler. Then from the app settings we are getting the key, which is your secret actually, and you're describing the token. Now, what is token supposed to comprise of? Header we don't have to take care of. The API internally takes care of the header. Subject is your claims data actually. So all your subject is claims identity, which is an array of claim data. Now in this array I am putting name and role, that's it. But can you put extra data? Yes, absolutely no problem. You can put issuer, you can put so many other things which I explained to you in the handout. Comma and put key value pairs. Remember, first parameter is of type string. So not necessary you should take only one of the value from claim types. What we have in claim types is only some standard values. This is a set of standard values, but it need not be this. It's up to you what you want in the claims data. Whatever you add here, you are going to get back. Remember that. So we on server, when we are creating the user object, in user object we are putting the token, and that token is what we are generating here. Remember that point. So creating a token requires claims identity. Claims identity is an array of claims data. Once we have that, we set the expiry time, 7 days, signed credentials. Now signing credentials is supposed to comprise of the key and the algorithm which we want to make use of. And once we have the signing credentials, we would then use token handler dot create token and token descriptor. So all these are properties in token descriptor. Signing credentials, expires and subject are properties of token descriptor. So we have put all the data required for generating a token here, and the token gets created here, which we are writing. Basically, remember, this is of type security token. But when we send it to the user, we want that token to be string. So we have to write into a token variable. Got it? User.token, which is of type string. User.token is of type string. So when you say write token, this particular token gets written and we get the value. The user has username already, because that's how it has come from the client. We have put the username. User dot name is not given, so let's put that. User dot username. So we have username, we have password, and we have token. Password actually is removed, sorry. Password is removed from the user object and the user is written. Oh, actually not required, because we are getting the user object from a collection and that already has all the data. From this list only we are getting. So we don't need to worry about setting individual object. We are not creating a new user object. From the database, based on the username and password, we are fetching the user object. That means all this data will be there in the user object. All this data will be there. So you don't even have to set the username, sorry. Just set the token, remove the password because it has been validated already, and return to the client. Don't put password. Now the token goes to the client. But this is all in helper method. Helper class, user service. Where is user service used? In users controller. So users controller has, basically it's an API controller. It's a web API controller. And in this web API controller, we have got, imagine ordinary controller only. Don't think of web API as anything special, but treat that as an ordinary controller. We are getting user service injected, and in authenticate method, which is allowed access for anonymous user, very important. Authenticate method, I am allowing access for anonymous user. Even if I do not write, it's okay, because we do not have authorize over here. So authenticate method is receiving a user object from the browser. So from body, that means from a request body, when we are doing a HTTP post, very important, this particular method is going to execute when the URL is /authenticate. To be more specific, it is supposed to be users/authenticate because of the routing. And once we have users/authenticate, this method is going to receive the body of that request, which is supposed to be a JSON object, which describes the user object, which is actually nothing but the username and password. So once we get the username and password, that username and password we are passing to authenticate method of user service. This will be null or not null. If it is equal to null, that means the password was invalid or username was invalid, and then we are returning bad request. But if it was okay, we are returning the user object to the client. Simple. In the response, we are returning the user object. Now that user object, client is supposed to save it. Once the client has saved that user object, then they should use that user object along with the request to call other methods. So here right now, I am putting authorize. I don't even bother about roles. I am saying that this particular method is supposed to be called from the browser, but it requires authentication. Without the token, if it is going to be called, it's going to give an error. What is important is this authorize is going to check if there is a token or not. And how is that going to happen? Because we have added a middleware, that is authorize, use authentication. Use authentication is dependent on what? The authorization provider. Who is the authorization provider here? JWT bearer. The authorization provider is the JWT bearer token. So this service, which is injected through a middleware, is going to check if the token is there in the request or not, and if it is valid. Only if it is valid, then it will let the user to execute this. Where we are doing some code, dummy code, that is not of importance to us. What it returns is not important. Point is this method executing or not executing? That is what is important. So let me build this project and I run users. I don't even have home controller, so it is going to give error when I run the program. Because there is no home controller. Yeah, if you want, you can give users slash get all, and you'll see you're going to get an error only. What is it? Users slash get all. Users slash, oh, it's a API project. So API slash users slash get all. Rather, no. You're not supposed to execute this. Oh, and yeah, it's a get method only. Anyways, we want to ideally execute this method through a JavaScript application. But we do not want to get into writing HTML, JavaScript or Angular and stuff. So for demo purpose, I'll directly use Postman. Here I have given the demo for you. I mean, what to do I have given for you. So you have to give now in Postman. If you don't have the Postman software, just go to postman.com and install it. You want to build a request. Let's not do that. So here I want to provide the URL. Cancel. Don't save. I'll do it fresh. So what is the URL? Take that first. And here in Postman, give the URL and say send. We got this. It's returning blank because we don't have any page which is added for unauthorized. Right now it is simply returning blank. So now I'll change this to, I'll keep this as it is. Here I'll change to authenticate. And for authenticate, in our case, the requirement is we are supposed to send a post request. That's what we have configured actually. Authenticate is post request. And what is the URL? URL is supposed to be users/authenticate. That's what I have given. The base URL along with users/authenticate. And now need to give key value pairs. But in my case, I want to provide a work payload in this format. Username, password. So that is supposed to be in body, and I want to send raw data which is in JSON format. Right now it is invalid username and password. Send it, and you should see here the message is username or password is incorrect. Now actually I have changed in my handout. In my program here I have user service, and here the username is test A and password is test. So username is supposed to be test A. Go to Postman, put here test A, test, submit. Now we should get a proper user object. Now what is important is in this user object, this token is important. So we have to write jQuery code or Angular code and use this token in subsequent request when we do a get call. How to give the token? Here we have to give authorization and bearer token. Ours is bearer token, right? So here we should add the token and then submit the request, and we should get the data, get all, and the body is with proper data. Basically all user objects are getting returned. Now just play around with the token, authorization token. Just the first key is there, I'm deleting that. Send it, and we get the response invalid token. The token is not valid. So header, we don't have any header, only authorization header. See, this is how the token is actually supposed to go. Bearer space the value. But Postman is giving us this ability where through authorization tab we are able to directly select a bearer and give the token. Internally it is going to send the request like this with authorization header. I don't want to get into stuff like framing a HTTP request using JavaScript out of our syllabus. Now let us do one thing. We will now give here in get all, this is user service, but I go to controller, and in get all I am saying only those users who have the roles admin can invoke it. Now what is important is when role based authentication is supposed to be implemented, you're actually supposed to use a claim called as role, and we are doing that. How is the role based authentication implemented? Whatever is the role of the user, you are supposed to add here, and that role is supposed to be matching one of the roles here. Might have an array, comma separated list here. So as long as the user request has a role by this name, then it is allowed access. So I rebuild my project, go back to Postman. I'm using the token. Copy the token, regenerate the token, copy the token, put it here under authorization, send it, and we got the response. Why? Because First user is admin. Now change this to B. Send it. I again get the token. I take this token now in the second tab for the authorization. Replace with the new token. Send the request and we should get the response. Success. Content length 0. You're not getting the response. Forbidden. Why forbidden? For the simple reason that this particular request is only for users with role admin. And here we did not get the role which has admin value. It has user value now. Test B, test C has user. So they cannot access this method get all users. But they can access any other method which has allowed a user role. Any user role method will be allowed access. Now, so right now we are not including any. So here new claim, and I'm now giving claims types, claim types dot, let's say I use we will see first what we have here. Valid audience. So you can also give here valid audiences and give a value here. It should be string array. Yeah. AUD1, AUD2, that's it, enough. Some audiences. I'm just trying to show you how this can be used. And this audiences I will put it here. So right now, is it checking for audience? It's not checking. Right now audience is not there in the request. When the token is generated, we don't have audience. And now if I call rebuild the project once, now get all with we need test A which has permission. I'll take this token, put it here for authorization, then we are getting the response. I've rebuilt the project, go back to Postman, and now I'm not sending any audience in the body. So here there is no audience. Oh, sorry, in the token we do not have audience, and without audience we are sending the request, so it is supposed to fail. Point is, did I give true in startup? Oh, it is still false. So right now you see, because this is false, we are able to execute the method though audience is not there. I've given the list of valid audiences, but the verification for audience is not done because this is false. I'm changing now to true. Now build it once again. Back to Postman. Now submit. and we should get an error. Invalid token. The audience is invalid. But let's include the audience now. How to include the audience? At the time of generating the token, we have to add one more claim now, which is audience. So type AUD, not there. Not there in the list. We'll type AUD and give audience as AUD1, which is valid in our case. Build it. Regenerate the new token now. First tab, post, we get a new token which has audience also now. Copy that token, put it in the second request, submit, and it should work. Perfect. So sometimes audience can be checked. And audience, point is we are only checking what we are giving. Basically, these are just ways of securing the user. Sometimes what happens is tokens will be provided by, let's say, Facebook. Facebook is going to generate the token. Google is going to generate the token based on Facebook authentication or Google authentication. And they would put Facebook as the audience. Sorry, that is for issuer, not audience. That is issuer. Facebook is going to put that as an issuer. And here we will then keep a list of valid issuers. Like I have done here, valid audiences. We also have valid issuers. And I should put here whatever values we are going to get. We have to check from the documentation what is the issuer value when the token is generated by Facebook. Whatever is the issuer value when the token is generated by Google. And those things we will put here and change this to true. And how to include issuer? ISS. That's the claim. ISS is the issuer claim. And only when it is Facebook or only when it is Google, because those authentication providers generate token which has that value of issuer, and then we validate it here. So this whole token concept is basically working like the way your let's say license works. The RTA, Road Transport Authority, issues us a license, and once a license is issued for a specified period of time, I can show that to anybody who is asking me for the license. So authorize is that traffic person who is actually stopping you and asking for your license. Authorize is like that traffic fellow who is telling you, are you authorized? So what are we doing to authorize? We are showing the license, and license has complete information. That information, if needed, he may cross check with his company, with his verification body, basically RTA. And if the license which you provide and RTA matches the information, he says yes, it is valid, and he will let you go. Otherwise, he will block you. So same thing. Basically, it's a token verification. The concept is same. These are all JWT token is a single sign-on token, because Facebook, Google, Twitter, Azure AD, all these people have implemented SSO, single sign-on. The common solution works across all the applications which support single sign-on. Automatically the same solution is going to work. So this is how JWT token is implemented, and users are authenticated based on their roles. Claims data can be extracted by using the claims API, user.claims, and you put the key which you want and get the value. So in claims we have got different keys, right? We have put whatever we have put here, name, So if I put claims type.name, I'm going to get the user value. So whatever we have put in claims that we want to get back here, it's possible using this array under the security, the principal object. User is the principal object through which we'll get all the data. That's all about JWT tokens. Thank you.